The anatomy of a nightmare. There is a famous saying that the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. Watching Hokum made me realize just how profoundly true that statement is. Experiencing this film is not just like watching a scary movie, it is like being trapped inside a waking nightmare. It replicates that terrifying, paralyzing sensation where you desperately want to wake up, but you can't because you don't even realize you are dreaming. From the opening frames, you feel an overwhelming sense of dread. You feel the anxiety creeping into your chest. The atmosphere and the overall vibe of the film physically weigh you down, wrapping around you like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Honestly, I was completely awestruck by this movie. It sucked me into its dark world so effectively that when the screen finally cut to black, I remained glued to my seat, staring blankly at the rolling credits, struggling to grasp the sheer intensity of what I had just witnessed. The evolution of Damien McCarthy. Hokum is directed by the brilliant Damien McCarthy, the visionary filmmaker behind modern indie horror gems like Caveat and Oddity. If you are familiar with his previous work, you will immediately recognize his signature style. All three of these films share the same oppressive, deeply unsettling atmosphere. However, there is a distinct difference this time around. Hokum feels massive. It feels as though McCarthy finally got a substantial studio budget and the absolute green light to unleash his most uncompromised, terrifying vision onto the screen. Watching this film is incredibly satisfying to see how much he has grown as a director. He has become remarkably confident in his craft. His films always carry a unique undercurrent of Irish folklore characterized by heavy symbolism and a rustic, woody, forest-bound aesthetic. Just like Caveat, Hokum isolates its narrative. It is entirely contained within one primary, inescapable location and tightly follows a single protagonist. Visually, McCarthy relies on his trademark dark, shadowy frames illuminated only by faint, sickly yellow glow of vintage lamps. The winter setting adds a biting, cold vibe to the visuals, but this time he doubles down every single element. He knows exactly what works for him, and he's honing his craft to a razor-sharp edge. The premise, grief, isolation, and the honeymoon suite. The narrative centers around a deeply flawed protagonist, played brilliantly by Adam Scott. He travels to an ancient sprawling hotel situated in a brutally remote location with a grim purpose: to scatter the ashes of his recently deceased parents. The entirety of the film unfolds within the claustrophobic confines of this isolated hotel. At the center of the hotel's dark history is a mysterious honeymoon suite. The owner keeps this room strictly locked, and the local rumors whisper a terrifying telltale: there is a witch imprisoned behind its doors. Naturally, the suite is entirely off limits and no guest is ever allowed near it. McCarthy uses this locked door as a brilliant narrative hook. The mystery surrounding the suite kept me completely engaged throughout the runtime. Eventually, we discover the terrifying geography of the building. To access the honeymoon suite, you actually have to go to the upper floors. But once inside the suite itself, there is a hidden rusted elevator that descends directly into the subterranean basement. And let me tell you, it is down in the basement where the absolute craziest and horrifying events of the film take place. The mechanics of fear, from jump scares to deep dread. Hokum is undeniably paralyzingly scary. Interestingly, McCarthy plays with audience expectation early on. The film actually starts by baiting you with what feel like cheap conventional jump scares. You see the main character creeping through the dark and suddenly a blurry figure darts across the background. But just as you think you know what kind of movie this is, Hokum shifts gears. It changes its mood entirely and morphs into something that genuinely disturbed me. The horror shifts from cheap thrills to psychological torment. For instance, the creature lurking in the basement is pure nightmare fuel. The lighting reveals only glimpses of her, the menacing gleam of her eyes shining through the dark before she suddenly, violently closes the distance between her and the camera. There is an incredibly tense sequence where this creature drags the character down a hallway into a room packed with a crowd of terrifying, unnatural figures. The tension in my theater was palpable. You could feel the collective anxiety radiating from the audience. Then there's the rabbit. If you have seen any of the promotional material or trailers for Hokum, you have probably caught a glimpse of this horrifying rabbit man. His scenes are undeniably the creepiest part of the entire film. In one pivotal scene, he appears inside a television screen. Out of nowhere, he starts frantically blabbering about Adam Scott's character. Through this bizarre, surreal broadcast, the rabbit actually delivers a flashback to Adam's past in the most spine-chilling way imaginable. That entire sequence left me with a profound feeling of uneasiness because the tone just keeps getting darker, plunging the viewer further into the abyss. A masterclass in atmosphere and sound. The scares work so well not just because of the creature designs like the witch or the rabbit, but because of how the film is shot and mixed. Hokum is bathed in pitch darkness. Not everything in the frame is clearly visible. There were several moments where I literally had to squint my eyes to decipher what was hiding in the shadows. Rather than feeling like a flaw, this visual obscurity heavily enhances the movie's vibe, creating a fiercely claustrophobic experience where the dark feels like it is closing in on you. However, as incredible as the visual atmosphere is, the sound design is the true star of the show. The audio landscape of Hokum is masterfully crafted. While the musical score is excellent, McCarthy is confident enough to let long stretches of the film play out in total, deafening silence. When the score does kick in, it carries this distinctly Irish folk horror essence. It is hard to put into exact words. It is mournful, haunting, and ancient. It gets beneath your skin in a way I can't quite explain, but I absolutely loved it. An unlikable protagonist, Adam Scott's dark turn. A major part of why the film's tension works is its protagonist. I loved the way Adam Scott's character was written, primarily because he's so deeply unlikable. It is a bold choice. He's a harsh, abrasive jerk, completely full of bad attitude and resentment. There is an incredibly grounded scene where an overly chatty bellboy is trying to strike up a conversation with him. Adam's character is completely disinterested, and his dismissive reaction is surprisingly relatable. Let's be honest, many of us are introverted. We can easily get irritated when someone fails to read the room, repeatedly invades our personal space, and just keeps talking when we want to be left alone. It is a very human moment. However, Adam's character eventually takes his frustration way too far in a shocking moment where he deliberately burns the bellboy's hand. Because it's a horror film, we accept the escalation, but it cements him as a troubled, borderline villainous lead. But McCarthy doesn't just leave him as a one-dimensional jerk. When the rabbit guy on the TV reveals the flashback to his past, the puzzle pieces click together. We suddenly understand the deep-seated trauma that made him so bitter and guarded, which adds a fantastic layer of psychological depth to the story. The flaws, framing devices and illusions. Look, I know I'm praising the film highly and I genuinely loved it, but it is not completely perfect. Not every creative swing connects. For example, the framing device. The film opens by establishing that Adam Scott's character is an author, and the opening sequence is supposedly a fictional scene from the book he is currently writing. The movie then concludes using the exact same framing device. Personally, I don't think it worked. I understand the intent behind it. Opening the film with an intense fictional sequence is a shocking misdirection. It throws you off balance. By bringing it back at the end, I get what McCarthy was trying to achieve. He wants to sow seeds of doubts. He wants to confuse the viewer into questioning reality, wondering if the entire nightmare at the hotel was just in Adam's head. This theory is even supported by the plot, as the bellboy spikes Adam's drink with hallucinogenic mushrooms. However, the film immediately undermines its own ambiguity. Right after trying to make us question reality, the camera deliberately lingers on a physical cuff mark on Adam Scott's wrist, irrefutable proof that the horrifying events in the basement actually happened in reality, because they definitively proved the events were real. Showing the fictional world of his writing in the epilogue feels pointless. It muddles the ending rather than enhancing it. The twist, blending murder mystery with folklore. Despite that minor pacing hiccup, the overarching narrative culminates in a massive, shocking twist. Throughout the film, there are moments where Hokum feels less like a straight horror movie and more like a gripping murder mystery. It effortlessly blends Irish folklore, missing personal cases, witchcraft, and supernatural terror. The biggest gut punch comes regarding his mother's death. Early in the film, while wandering in the jungle with a mushroom-obsessed guy, Adam recounts the tragic story of how his mother was murdered, shot by a random assailant. The delivery was so raw and convincing that I believed him completely. I never once suspected he was lying. So later in the film, when the devastating truth is revealed that it was young Adam himself who accidentally shot and killed his own mother, It hit me like a freight train. It recontextualized his entire character, his grief and his absolute need to scatter the ashes at this cursed hotel. Conclusion: the verdict. Ultimately, Hokum is unequivocally one of the scariest, most effective films I've seen this entire year. It is a pure, unadulterated horror film. It refuses to rely on the crutches of relentless gore, excessive violence, or cheap jump scares. Instead, it earns your fear. It terrifies you with its oppressive atmosphere, its bone-chilling vibe, and its masterful sound design. It scares you when the characters are trapped in that godforsaken basement. It makes you fear the darkness itself. Hokum is the kind of cinematic experience that stays with you long after you leave the theater. It is a film that will actively make you want to sleep with lights on. That was the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Hokum. If you did, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts on the movie, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more horror reviews. See you next time. Till then, bye.